Friends, let me tell you about something that happened right here in Pittsburgh last winter. Now, I've lived in this city for 73 years, seen the steel mills close and the young folks move away, but I never saw anything quite like what happened between Grant Harrison and Walter Coleman. You might remember the Harrison name from the newspapers. His family ran the biggest publishing house in Pennsylvania. But this isn't about newspapers or money. It's about a man who had everything the world says matters, but couldn't write a simple letter to his own daughter. Sometimes the good Lord puts people in our path not by accident, but by design. This story proves it. Pour yourself some coffee, the regular kind, not that fancy stuff, and let me tell you how a man who'd lost everything taught a billionaire what really matters. Grant Harrison stood across from the old Carnegie Library, watching through the diner window as the man's trembling hand somehow steadied itself to write. December wind cut through downtown Pittsburgh like it always did this time of year. The fellow on the library steps, wearing a Carnegie Mellon sweatshirt that looked older than some of the kids walking past, was writing a letter for a young mother who couldn't stop crying. 3 wrinkled dollar bills lay on the cold concrete. The cardboard sign against his worn rucksack read plain as day, "Letters written, $5. The mother was digging through her pocketbook now, counting quarters and dimes the way Grant's own mother used to at the A&P back in '78. The man, Walter, Grant heard someone call him, waved her counting away, kept his pen moving steady across the paper. When he finished, that young mother grabbed his weathered hands and pressed them to her forehead. Lord have mercy, it was something to see. Made Grant's old Hamilton watch feel heavy as lead on his wrist. Before we continue, please leave a like and subscribe. Let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. Grant's knees complained against the cold concrete as he lowered himself down, 3 feet from Walter. The December wind carried diesel fumes from the 61C bus grinding past, mixed with something else. Maxwell House coffee, the same brand his father drank every morning until the day he died. The phone in Grant's pocket buzzed. Margaret again. His secretary had called 6 times since breakfast. The Harrison building stood 7 blocks south, all 45 floors of it, where 2,800 employees waited for his decisions. 3 board meetings this afternoon, the contract from those Japanese fellows needed signing. He left the phone in his pocket. Walter's thermos cap doubled as a second cup. Steam rose between them in the cold air. The coffee was terrible. Bitter, watered down, probably 3 hours old. Grant took it anyway, his fingers touching the same rim where Lord knows how many strangers had drunk before him. Most folks want love letters, Walter said, testing his pens on the back of his hand until one ran smooth. Some want apologies, few know the difference. A man shuffled past, Eugene, according to the Purple Heart pinned to his old Army field jacket. He dropped $1 in Walter's jar without asking for anything. Walter nodded, small enough you'd miss it if you weren't watching close. "You teach somewhere?" Grant asked, noting how Walter held his pen proper, like Mrs. Henderson taught back in grade school. "Taught, Central High, 15 years. Walter's good hand, the left one, sorted through plastic-covered sample letters. You lose something, you find another way to use what you know. The tremor in Walter's right hand got worse when he reached for his coffee. Grant recognized it from when his mother's hands shook the same way her last winter. "What did you lose?" Walter looked at him then, really looked. Eyes the color of Lake Erie in November, seeing past Grant's second-hand coat to something deeper. "Same thing you did, I'm guessing." He pulled out a fresh yellow legal pad, the kind Grant's father used for grocery lists. "Your daughter. What's her name?" Grant's throat closed up tight. That name hadn't crossed his lips in 6 years, not since she'd stood in his office, holding her manuscript, saying words that still woke him at 3 in the morning. "How did you—" Nobody sits on these steps unless they've got something needs saying and no way to say it. "Harper." The name came out rough as sandpaper. "Her name is Harper." Walter wrote it on the yellow pad in careful block letters. Harper. each stroke deliberate, like he was carving it into wood. 28 now? Grant nodded. His fingers found the edge of his old wallet, worn smooth from 30 years of back pockets. 6 years meant she'd finished law school, started working, maybe married. Things a father ought to know. Tell me something about her when she was little. Walter's pen waited above the paper. Not what she achieved. A moment. Something ordinary. The question caught Grant sideways. Company presidents prepared for hostile takeovers. Not this. Saturday mornings. His voice cracked like a teenager's. Started again. She'd climb into my office chair while I worked. Never said much. Just sat there eating her breakfast, watching me work on the adding machine. Cheerios. Always dry Cheerios. Never the frosted flakes her mother bought. Walter wrote something down, crossed it out, wrote again. How old? 4, maybe 5. You stop working when she climbed up? Grant's chest got tight as a fist. No. Walter's pen scratched across paper. The sound carried over the rumble of downtown traffic, the distant clatter of shopping carts from the giant eagle across the street. She'd fall asleep there, Grant continued, though Walter hadn't asked. Curled up like our old tabby cat. I'd keep typing quarterly reports around her. Eugene settled onto the steps beside them, bringing the smell of Old Spice and something medicinal. Rubbing alcohol from the VA hospital, maybe. He pulled out a sandwich wrapped in napkins from McDonald's, tore it in thirds. 1 piece for himself, 1 for Walter, 1 held out toward Grant. Grant took it. The bread was stale, the meat cold as the December air. You telling him about Brennan yet? Eugene asked Walter through a mouthful. Walter's jaw tightened up. No need for that. Man should know who he's sitting with. Eugene turned to Grant. Teach here got himself fired standing up to Senator Brennan. The senator's boy copied his whole final paper from some encyclopedia. Word for word. Walter gave him an F. Grant knew Senator Thomas Brennan, had written endorsements for him twice in the Harrison papers. The newsroom boys called him untouchable. Brennan came to Walter's classroom himself, Eugene continued. Right in front of 30 kids. Said Walter could change that grade or clean out his desk. You know what Teach did? Walter's hand shook harder. He switched the pen to his left hand, kept writing. Pulled out his red pen, Eugene said. Circled that F again. Darker this time. Then packed his desk while 30 kids watched their teacher choose truth over a paycheck. That was 10 years ago, Walter said, quiet as a prayer. And you've been writing letters on these steps every day since. Eugene stood, brushed crumbs from his army jacket. Because this man won't bend the truth for nobody. Remember that when he writes your letter. Eugene shuffled toward the library entrance, where a security guard named Carl let him use the bathroom even though the library was closed for repairs. Grant studied Walter's face. Deep lines around the eyes from squinting at papers in bad light. Stubble missed in patches where the shaking made shaving with a straight razor dangerous. But his posture stayed straight as a yardstick, like he was still standing at a blackboard. The boy, Brennan's son, what happened to him? Marcus. Walter set down the pen, flexed his fingers like Grant's mother used to when her arthritis acted up. Nearly died 2 years ago, stomach pump, hospital for 3 months. He made it? He's in recovery, writes me letters now, real letters, not copied from anywhere. Walter's eyes stayed on Grant. First honest grade he ever got, he told me. Took him 8 years and nearly dying, but he figured out the difference between earning something and having it handed to you. Walter picked up the pen again, switched hands. The tremor followed to the left side now, subtle, but there. Your daughter, Harper. Did she want to write? The question hit Grant like a punch to the gut. His hand went to his chest, pressing against the spot where memory lived like shrapnel. How could you possibly? Teachers notice things. Kids who bring their own pens or borrow them. Notes neat or scattered. Letters pressed hard with feeling or barely touching paper like they're afraid to take up space. Walter tapped the legal pad. "You hold this pen like someone taught you proper penmanship at boarding school, but you're asking me to write to someone who might hold one like a paintbrush. Creative. Different." She had a manuscript. The words tumbled out before Grant could stop them. 6 years ago, came to my office with it. 300 pages she'd written at night after her job at the law firm. Fiction. About a daughter and father who only knew each other through newspaper articles he'd written. Walter's pen stopped moving. "I burned it." Grant's hands shook worse than Walter's now. "Right there in my office fireplace. Told her writing was a hobby, not a career. That Harrison's built things that mattered, not stories." The pen in Walter's hand snapped clean in half. Blue ink spread across his palm like a bruise. "You burned her book?" Grant looked at the broken pen, the spreading ink. "She tried to pull it out of the fire, burned her hand grabbing for it. The scar is probably still—" "Mr. Harrison?" Grant's blood went cold as January slush. Walter hadn't said his last name, hadn't asked for it. "How long have you known who I am?" Walter wiped the ink from his palm with a handkerchief that might have been white back when Kennedy was president. The blue stain spread through the worn cotton, permanent as regret. "Since you sat down." Walter pulled another pen from his satchel, a Bic that probably cost 19 cents at Woolworth's. "Those shoes. Italian leather trying to look like Tom McCann. The outline of that fancy fountain pen in your breast pocket. The way you check that telephone like it owns you." Grant's hand moved to his pocket without thinking. The Mont Blanc was there, $900 of German engineering he'd forgotten to leave in his office safe. But mostly, Walter reached into his satchel, pulled out a manila folder soft with age and handling. "Because I taught Harper 11 years ago, senior year, English literature, 4th period." The folder opened to reveal essays, dozens of them. The handwriting made Grant's lungs seize up. Harper's teenage script, half cursive, half print, the way she used to write grocery lists on the kitchen notepad. She was 17. Walter's trembling fingers found a particular essay, separated it from the stack. Coffee rings stained the cover page. Red pen marks covered the margins. Not corrections, but conversation. Questions. Encouragement. The kind of attention Grant never gave her writing. "Best writer I had in 15 years of teaching." The title read, "The Man in the Newspaper, A Daughter's Translation." Grant's vision went blurry. His hand reached for the paper, stopped inches away like it might burn him too. "Read it," Walter said. The first paragraph. "My father exists in 12-point Times New Roman. Every morning his thoughts appear on doorsteps across the city, wrapped in plastic against the rain. 40,000 people know his opinions on health care, on elections, on the economy. I know he takes his coffee black because I've watched him pour it, but I learned his position on immigration reform before I learned his middle name." Grant's throat closed up tight as a fist. His fingers gripped the paper's edge hard enough to crease it. The second paragraph. "He writes about family values every Sunday. 300 words on the importance of dinner tables, of bedtime stories, of being present. I save these columns in a shoebox under my bed. Not because I believe them, but because they're the closest thing I have to conversations we've never had." "Stop." Grant pushed the essay back toward Walter. "I can't. She wrote this 2 months before college applications." Walter's voice carried no judgment, just fact, like reading a grocery receipt. "I told her to submit it for the Yale Young Writers Award." "Know what she said?" Grant shook his head, not trusting his voice. "Said her father would think writing was a waste of time, that Harrison's built things, companies, empires, legacies, not stories." A city bus wheezed to a stop at the corner, brakes squealing like they needed work. The door opened with that hydraulic hiss. An elderly woman climbed down slow, one step at a time, while the driver waited. Nobody honked, nobody complained. Pittsburgh patience, the kind that understood some things couldn't be rushed. Walter continued reading aloud, his voice taking on that teacher rhythm, the kind that made you lean in and listen. When I was 7, I wrote him a story about a rabbit who collected words instead of carrots. He was on a telephone call when I brought it to his office. He took it, smiled that smile he uses for photographers, put it in his desk drawer. I found it 3 years later, still folded, unread, under a stack of contracts for the paper mill acquisition. Grant's fist pressed against his mouth, his teeth cut into his knuckles hard enough to taste copper. I stopped writing stories after that, until Mrs. Chen— Wait, Grant looked up sharp. Dorothy Chen taught creative writing. Dorothy Chen, retired the year before Harper graduated. Walter's eyes stayed steady on Grant's face. She encouraged Harper to take my class, said the girl had a gift that shouldn't be wasted. Dorothy Miller now, Walter continued, remarried after her husband passed. She volunteers here, teaching English to folks from the old country. Pretends she needs my help with letters to her grandchildren in California. Grant remembered Dorothy Chen. She taught at Central High for 30 years. Husband was a physics professor at Pitt. The pages rustled in the cold wind. Walter placed a painted rock on them, smooth river stone with a child's handprint in purple tempera paint, a paperweight from a classroom long gone. This essay, Walter tapped the last paragraph. She ended it with a question. Grant forced himself to look at Harper's words. If a father's love falls in a forest of deadlines and no daughter is there to hear it, does it make a sound? Maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the question is, if a daughter screams into the silence long enough, does it become a conversation? The date at the top of the page, November 15th, 2013. 1 month before Harper's early acceptance to Columbia. The scholarship she'd earned herself, the future she'd built while Grant built his empire. I wrote her a recommendation letter, Walter said. Sent copies to Columbia, Yale, Harvard. Every school she applied to. Know what I focused on? Grant waited. Her courage. 17 years old and brave enough to see her father clearly. Love him anyway. That takes a particular kind of strength. Walter's trembling hand found another essay in the stack. This one she wrote after you won the Media Excellence Award, spring semester. The title, Goliath's Shadow, Growing Up Small. Grant stood abruptly. His knee knocked the thermos. Coffee spread across the concrete, steaming in the cold December air. I need a minute. No! Walter's voice carried the authority of every classroom he'd ever commanded. You need 11 years, but a minute's all we have. He pulled out a fresh legal pad, yellow like the ones Grant's father used for everything important. Wrote, Dear Harper, at the top, in letters so careful they could have been from a penmanship book. I can't write her through you. Grant's voice broke like a boy's. She'd know. She always knew when I had Margaret type birthday cards. Not asking you to. Walter drew a line under Harper's name with a ruler from his satchel. I'm going to teach you how to write to her yourself. But first, he opened to a new page, dated it December 3rd, 2024. You're going to tell me what happened the day you burned her manuscript. Every detail. What she wore, what the fire sounded like, the smell of burning paper, how her hand looked after. Why? Because that's where your letter starts. The moment you became someone she couldn't forgive. Walter pulled out a third pad, white this time. And we're going to find the words that make you someone she can. Grant sat back down. His knee touched the cooling coffee puddle. The wet soaked through his wool trousers, cold and real as regret. She wore purple, he began. Her mother's favorite color. The manuscript was in a white binder, the cheap kind from the 5 and dime. She'd drawn a heart on the cover in red ink. Walter wrote. His trembling hand steadied with each word, as if recording truth was medicine for whatever was claiming his body. The fire was already going. November, cold snap that year. I'd been editing the Sunday editorial about fiscal responsibility. Grant's fingers found the wet wool, pressed into it. She stood by the mantel. 22 years old, but looked 17 still. Nervous, the way she used to look before piano recitals. What did she say first? "Dad, I wrote something." Walter's pen scratched across paper. In the distance, the Cathedral of Learning's bells chimed 3 o'clock. The library would stay closed another month for renovations, another month of Walter on these steps. "Mr. Harrison," Walter looked up from his writing. "Your daughter, she still writes, doesn't she?" How could he possibly know that? Week 1. Grant's fingers cramped around the Bic pen. Wrong. Everything about his grip was wrong. Like this. Walter's steady left hand guided Grant's wrist. From the shoulder, not the fingers. The whole arm writes, not just the hand. The cheap pen felt foreign after 40 years of typewriters and adding machines. Grant's letters came out shaky, like a first grader's. The yellow legal pad showed 3 attempts at "Dear Harper," each one crossed out, started over. Why does the grip matter? Because she'll see the tension in your handwriting, every loop, every line. Children know when their parents are performing versus when they're present. Walter demonstrated on his own pad. See? Relaxed grip makes honest letters. The library steps had become Grant's office. 7 in the morning arrival before the factory workers changed shifts downtown. He brought coffee from home, the good Hills Brothers in the red can. Walter poured it out, refilled the thermos with Maxwell House from inside the closed library's break room where Carl the guard kept a pot going. "Taste interferes," Walter explained. "You start thinking about the coffee instead of the words." Dorothy Miller arrived at 7:40 each morning. She'd speak Chinese to Walter, pretending her English was poor. Grant had heard her discussing Chaucer with Eugene yesterday when she thought nobody was listening. "My granddaughter," she said in perfect English when Walter walked Eugene to the bathroom. "She loves your newspaper's funny pages. I save them for her every Sunday." Grant hadn't known his papers still printed the funnies. Margaret handled all that now. Week 2. The pen felt less foreign now. Grant's letters steadied, though his shoulder ached from the new motion. Walter had given him exercises, circles, lines, waves, like Sister Mary Catherine teaching penmanship back at St. Joseph's, except Grant was 52 and had forgotten how to move slow. "Read this back," Walter said, pointing at Grant's latest attempt. "Harper, I was wrong about your manuscript." "Stop." Walter took the pen, crossed out the line. "You're apologizing to feel better. Try again." Grant wrote, "Harper, I remember the sound of paper burning. Better. Keep going. And the smell of your skin when you reached into the fire." Grant's hand stopped. His throat felt full of ash. "Good," Walter said. "Now you're feeling what she felt." A woman approached with a toddler on her hip. Young, maybe 25, wearing a Hilton housekeeping uniform under her coat. "Mr. Walter, you wrote letter for my mother last month, about my father's death." Walter stood, slower than the week before. The tremor had moved to his legs now, subtle but there when he walked. "Maria, how is she?" "She read it 40 times, carries it in her pocketbook." The woman pulled out a $20 bill. "She wants you to write another, to my father's mother in Guatemala." "Tell me about her." Grant watched Walter work. The questions he asked, not about facts, but about feelings. What did the grandmother cook for Sunday dinner? Did she sing while washing dishes? What did her laugh sound like? The letter took 30 minutes. Maria cried as Walter read it back, the toddler playing with Grant's shoelaces the entire time. Week 3. "You know everyone," Grant said, watching the 7th person that morning stop to greet Walter. "I know everyone who's been forgotten." Walter sorted through his morning mail. Not bills, but thank you cards. Dozens of them. The invisible people, they find each other. Eugene had set up a chessboard on the bottom step. He played against himself while Walter worked, calling out moves. Knight to bishop 4, Eugene said. That's checkmate in 3 moves. 5 moves, Walter corrected without looking up. You play? Grant asked. Taught Eugene, back when I had steadier hands. Walter's right hand trembled worse today. Whatever medicine he took wasn't working as well anymore. Grant's telephone buzzed. Margaret again. Tokyo deal needs signature. Board meeting in 2 hours. He called her back from the payphone on the corner. Handle it, he said. Mr. Harrison, you're going to lose everything if you keep this up. Maybe it needs losing. When he returned, Walter was watching him. Week 3. Right on schedule. Schedule for what? Rich men's guilt. Lasts about 10 days. Then you'll go back to your tower, write a check to charity, feel better about yourself. Grant's jaw tightened. You don't know me. I know you haven't asked about Harper's newspaper column. The words hit like ice water in January. Her column? Pittsburgh Invisible. She writes about people like us, like me, like Eugene, like Dorothy. Walter pulled out a folded newspaper section, the Post-Gazette's local section. Been writing it for 2 years, under a pen name, but I recognized her style. The column header read, Pittsburgh Invisible, by H. Morrison. This week's headline, The Man Who Writes Love Letters for Strangers. Grant's hands shook, taking the newspaper. Every morning at 7, he arrives at the Carnegie Library steps. His right hand shakes, so he writes with his left now. He charges $5, but never collects. This is about you, Grant breathed. Published yesterday. She must have been watching. She does that. Observes for weeks before approaching. Walter took the newspaper back. She's her father's daughter, researches everything. Week 4. The morning Dorothy pretended to need help writing to her granddaughter, Grant recognized the performance. She spoke Mandarin to Walter, who responded in careful tones he'd learned from library books. But Grant caught her reading the Wall Street Journal, making notes in the margins with a fountain pen. You were a professor, Grant said when Walter stepped away to help Eugene with VA paperwork. Chemistry, 30 years at Beijing University. Her accent disappeared completely. My husband was a physicist. We came here in 1989, after the Troubles. He died last spring. Why pretend? Because people help when they think you're helpless. Pride is a luxury I can't afford anymore. She looked at Walter, who was filling out forms in triplicate for Eugene. He knows I pretend. I know he knows. But we both need the fiction. Grant's latest letter draft covered 3 pages now. Walter had made him rewrite the opening 40 times. Harper, your hand still had blisters when you graduated from Columbia. I watched you shift your diploma to your left hand for the photograph. I knew what I'd done. I stood there knowing, and still I smiled for the camera. Truth, Walter said, reading it. Keep going. The weather turned bitter cold. Grant brought Army surplus blankets from the Navy store on Liberty Avenue, which Walter distributed to others first. The white dog, Aurora, Dorothy called her, appeared more frequently, drawn by the egg sandwiches Walter saved from breakfast. She trusts you, Grant observed. She trusts routine. Same time, same place, same person. Walter's hand shook harder, trying to pet her. When I'm gone, someone else will need to... You're not going anywhere. Walter looked at him with those Lake Erie eyes. Everyone goes somewhere, Mr. Harrison. The question is what we leave behind. Week 5. Margaret stood on the library steps at 6:30 in the morning, before Walter arrived. The board is concerned, she said without preamble. You've missed 12 meetings. The Japanese pulled out of the deal. Good morning to you too, Margaret. Grant? She never used his first name. People are talking. They think you're having some kind of breakdown. Maybe I am. She studied his second-hand coat from Goodwill, the coffee stain on the sleeve. the calluses forming on his fingers from holding the pen. Is this about Harper? Grant's silence was answer enough. She called the office, Margaret said quietly. Yesterday. First time in 6 years. Grant's heart stopped. What did she want? Asked if you were dead. Said someone saw you on the library steps looking like a bum. I told her you were on a special assignment. What did she say? Nothing. Just hung up. Walter arrived then, moving slower than yesterday. Eugene beside him, carrying the supplies Walter could no longer manage alone. Margaret looked between them. This is him? The letter writer? Walter extended his trembling hand. Walter Coleman. She shook it carefully. You're the teacher, the one who refused to change the Brennan boys' grade. You have a good memory. I remember integrity. It's rare enough to notice. She turned to Grant. The board meets Thursday. Be there or be replaced. Week 6. Grant answered Walter's telephone by mistake, both devices ringing at once. The old flip phone felt tiny in his hand. Mr. Coleman? This is Marcus Brennan. I wanted to thank you for your last letter. Grant's blood went cold. The senator's son, the one who'd almost died. This isn't... I'm sorry, I grabbed the wrong telephone. Silence. Then, is this Mr. Harrison, the newspaper man? Yes. You endorsed my father, twice. I did. He destroyed Mr. Coleman's life. You helped him get the power to do it. Grant had no answer for that truth. Tell Mr. Coleman I'm 90 days sober. Tell him I'm writing letters to everyone I hurt, like he taught me. The line went dead. Walter returned from the bathroom, each step deliberate, careful. That was Marcus Brennan, Grant said. Good kid. Terrible choices, good heart. Walter lowered himself onto the step. His father's running for governor next year. You know that, right? Grant did know. Had been preparing endorsement editorials already. I have files, Walter said quietly. Other kids Thomas Brennan had me pressured about. Other grades changed. Not everyone was as stubborn as me. That's evidence of corruption, academic fraud, abuse of power. Walter's trembling hand pulled out a small envelope. It's all documented. Letters, memos, witness statements. Grant stared at the envelope. Why give this to me? Because you have the platform to expose it. The question is whether you have the courage. Walter placed the envelope in Grant's palm. Harper would publish it without hesitation. She has her mother's sense of justice. You have a choice. Be the man your daughter thinks you are, or be the man she needs you to be. Week 7. The letter was almost finished. 4 pages of truth, handwritten until Grant's fingers bled at the joints. Dorothy arrived with medical tape. Guitarist's tape, she said. My husband played violin. Same problem when he practiced too long. She wrapped Grant's fingers with surprising gentleness. You know who he really is, Grant said. It wasn't a question. Walter? Of course. We all do. The big publisher playing poor to write a story about us. She tied off the tape. But then you stopped playing, didn't you? That afternoon, Grant sketched plans on the legal pad. Not letters, floor plans, an office, desks, a program. Walter watched him work. What's this? The Letter Project. Teaching people to write letters to reconnect families. Hiring people like you to run it. People like me are dying, Mr. Harrison. Then we better move fast. Walter's laugh turned into a cough. Eugene brought water, held the cup steady while Walter drank. You want to hire me? I want you to run it. Full medical benefits, proper treatment, salary that lets you live with dignity. And what do you get? Grant looked at the letter to Harper, almost complete now. Maybe my daughter sees I'm trying to be better. That's not how forgiveness works. Then teach me how it does work. Week 8. Walter had Grant rewrite the contract proposal 7 times. Not the legal language, the mission statement. You're still writing like a company president, Walter said. Write like a father. Final version. The letter project exists because connection shouldn't require perfect words, just true ones. Better, Walter admitted. The white dog, Aurora, now came every morning, slept at Walter's feet while he worked. Grant had tried bringing Kennel ration from the A&P. She wouldn't touch it, only ate from Walter's hand. Trust isn't about quality, Walter explained. It's about consistency. The morning Grant signed the lease for the letter project's first space, ground floor of the Harrison building, Walter's tremor was so bad he couldn't hold a pen at all. You write for me today, he said to Grant. Mrs. Chen needs a letter to her doctor about her husband's last wishes. Grant's hand froze. I can't. That's too important. Every letter is too important. That's the point. Walter guided Grant's hand to the paper. Start with Dear Dr. Morrison. For 3 hours, Grant wrote other people's truths. A veteran's apology to his ex-wife. A mother's plea to an estranged son. A grandfather's blessing to a grandchild he'd never met. His fingers bled through the tape. His shoulders screamed. But he kept writing, because Walter kept dictating, and people kept coming, and the need was endless. Mr. Harrison, Grant looked up. A young woman stood there, late 20s, purple scarf around her neck. Her hair was darker, shorter, but the eyes. Harper held a reporter's notebook and a cassette recorder, the kind journalists used. I'm here to interview Mr. Coleman about his letter-writing service. Walter's trembling hand found Grant's wrist under the table. A warning? Support? Grant couldn't tell. Harper, Grant said. She looked at him, really looked. Past the second-hand clothes and the exhaustion and the bloody bandages on his fingers. I know who you are, she said. Then, turning to Walter, I'm here for your story, Mr. Coleman, not his. Harper set her cassette recorder on the concrete between them. The red recording light blinked steady as a heartbeat. Grant counted the pulses. 1, 2, 3, matching the thud in his chest. Mr. Coleman, she said, not looking at Grant, tell me about the first letter you wrote for someone else. Walter's trembling hand reached for his thermos. Grant moved to help. Harper's hand got there first, steadying the cup while Walter drank. 10 years ago, Walter began. First week after the school board let me go. Sitting right here, actually. Woman needed to write her son in Greensburg prison. Couldn't spell. Hands shook worse than mine do now. The DTs. Harper's pen moved across her notepad. Her handwriting hadn't changed. Same half-cursive Grant remembered from grocery lists stuck to the Frigidaire. Permission slips for field trips to the Carnegie Museum. Birthday cards she'd made at 7 with construction paper and Elmer's glue. What did you write? 7 words. I love you. Please come home. Mom. Harper's pen stopped. That's all? That's everything. Grant watched his daughter's profile. The small scar on her left temple from falling off her Schwinn at 8. The way she pressed her tongue against her teeth when concentrating, just like Helen used to. Mr. Harrison hasn't said anything for the record, Harper noted, still not looking at him. Does he often sit here while you work? 6 weeks now, Walter said. He's learning to write letters. To whom? Walter and Grant exchanged glances. The tremor in Walter's hand worsened. Someone he hurt, Walter said simply. Harper's jaw tightened. She flipped through her notebook, found a specific page. I've been reading your columns about him, Walter said suddenly. Pittsburgh Invisible. You never mention him by name, but I taught you for a year, Harper. I know your tells. She looked up sharp. My column uses a pen name. The man in the expensive suit who counts everything except what matters. Published 3 months ago. Walter pulled out newspaper clippings from his satchel, yellowed and folded. He walks past the homeless veteran at 5th and Wood every morning, earbuds in, Wall Street Journal folded under his arm. 22 seconds. That's how long it takes him to traverse 30 feet of human suffering. Grant's stomach turned to lead. Harper had been watching him, timing him with her Timex. That's not, Harper started. June 15th's column. Fathers and daughters in Market Square. I count 17 pairs sharing lunch. Mine is 3 blocks away, eating takeout at his desk, writing tomorrow's editorial about family values. Harper's recorder kept blinking. The red light reflected off tears she wouldn't let fall. You knew, she said to Walter. When you saw me watching last week from the coffee shop, you knew who I was. Recognized your writing style sophomore year when you submitted that piece about growing up in your father's shadow. Changed the names, but teachers remember voices. Then you know I can't. Harper's voice cracked. She cleared her throat, started again. This isn't about him. No? Walter's good hand, the left one, pointed at Grant's bandaged fingers. Show her. Grant hesitated, then unwound the medical tape Dorothy had applied that morning. The skin beneath was raw, split at the joints from holding the pen wrong for 6 weeks. Blood had dried in the creases of his knuckles. Every morning for 6 weeks, Walter said, learning to write with his hands instead of his typewriter. You know what his first legible sentence was? Harper shook her head. I burned my daughter's dreams to warm my own ambition. The recorder's battery light turned yellow, low power. Harper didn't notice. Mr. Coleman, she said formally, this interview is about you. Is it? Walter pulled out the folder he'd shown Grant weeks ago. Harper's high school essays. Or is it about the girl who wrote these? Harper's breath caught. Her hand moved toward the folder, stopped inches away. You kept them? Every one. Even the angry ones, especially those. Walter opened to a specific page. Senior year, 2nd semester. You wrote about watching your father win the Media Excellence Award. Remember what you titled it? The Stranger at the Podium. Harper's voice came out whispered. Read the last line. Harper took the paper. Her hands shook worse than Walter's. I love him the way you love a house you grew up in that's been sold to strangers. From a distance, with memory, with grief for rooms you can no longer enter. Grant's fingernails cut into his palms. Blood seeped through the fresh cuts. I have something for you, Walter told Harper. He pulled out a sealed envelope, her name written on it in shaky letters. Recommendation letter. For that writing fellowship at Breadloaf. How did you? Teachers keep track, even 10 years later. Walter's tremor moved through his whole arm now. Grant, help me stand. Grant moved to Walter's right side, took his weight. The older man felt lighter than last week, bones sharp through the old Carnegie Mellon sweatshirt. Harper, Walter's voice carried the authority of every classroom he'd commanded. Your father has been writing you a letter for 6 weeks. 4 pages. His own words, his own hand. Will you read it? She looked at Grant then, first real eye contact in 6 years. The scar on her right palm caught the afternoon light, the burn from reaching into his office fireplace. Not here, she said. Where? Somewhere that doesn't have an audience. Grant looked around. Eugene had arrived, setting up his chessboard. Dorothy was walking up from the bus stop. 3 veterans waited nearby for Walter's help with VA paperwork. The coffee shop, Grant suggested. Corner booth. Harper shook her head. Too public. Walter swayed. Grant tightened his grip. You all right? Fine. Just... Walter's left leg buckled. Grant caught him as he fell, lowering him to the steps. Walter's head lolled back, eyes rolling white. Call an ambulance, Grant shouted to Eugene, who was already running to the payphone on the corner. Harper dropped beside them, her recorder clattering across concrete. She pulled off her purple scarf, the one Helen had knitted, folded it under Walter's head. Mr. Coleman? Walter? She checked his pulse at his neck. Too fast, maybe 140. How do you... I've been researching Parkinson's for my column, the late-stage symptoms. She looked at Grant. How long has he been hiding the severity? I don't know. Yes, you do. You've been watching him deteriorate for 6 weeks. Her fingers kept monitoring Walter's pulse. When did the leg tremors start? Week 3. Speech slurring? Last Tuesday, just occasionally. Has he been taking his medication? Grant remembered Walter dry swallowing pills each morning, hiding the bottle when people approached. Yes, but I think he's been cutting them in half, making them last longer. Of course he has. Harper's voice broke. Too proud to ask for help. Just like... She stopped. The ambulance siren wailed closer, that particular Pittsburgh sound of engines echoing off old buildings. Walter's eyes fluttered open. He tried to speak, managed only a wheeze. Don't talk, Harper said. Save your strength. Walter's trembling hand found Grant's letter in his jacket pocket. He pulled it out, pressed it into Harper's hands. Now, he whispered. Read it now. Mr. Coleman, please. His eyes moved between them. Before it's too late. I've seen too many letters never get read. The paramedics arrived, metal equipment clanging against the concrete steps. They moved Harper and Grant aside, began their assessment. Blood pressure cuff, oxygen mask, IV needle finding a vein. We're taking him to Presbyterian, one said. Family? Grant started. We're his family, Harper said firmly. I'm his former student. This is my father. They loaded Walter onto the gurney. Aurora appeared from nowhere, whining, trying to follow. The dog, Walter gasped through the oxygen mask. I've got her, Eugene called out, already holding Aurora's collar. Go! In the ambulance, Harper sat on one side, Grant on the other. Walter's eyes stayed closed, but his hand clutched Harper's. Read, he whispered. Please. Harper looked at Grant across Walter's prone body. The ambulance hit a pothole. Pittsburgh streets in December. Medical equipment rattled. She unfolded the letter. 4 pages covered in Grant's painstaking handwriting. Blood stains at the edges where his fingers had bled through the practice. Dear Harper, she began, her voice steady. I have written you 1,000 letters in my mind. This is the first one I've written with my hands. The heart monitor beeped steady. Walter's breathing grew more labored. The paramedic adjusted the oxygen flow. Harper kept reading, but her eyes weren't moving across the page anymore. She was reciting from memory. Grant realized she'd been there every morning, watching from somewhere. Watching him learn to write. Watching him fail and try again. Watching him become someone she might forgive. The ambulance hit another pothole. Walter's eyes opened, focused on Harper. Your essay, he said through the mask. The one about your father. You never turned in the last page. Harper's tears fell onto Grant's letter, blurring the ink. I couldn't figure out the ending. Now you can. Walter's hand went slack in hers. The ICU smelled like floor wax, and that particular hospital smell, the one that stuck to your clothes, followed you home. Grant remembered it from his mother's last days at Allegheny General. Mechanical ventilator keeping time, 17 breaths per minute. He'd been counting for 3 hours. Walter's hand lay still on the white sheet. No tremor now. The medicines had stopped that, along with most everything else. Parkinson's crisis, the neurologist had explained, clipboard in hand. Severe dyskinesia. His medication stopped working. Happens sometimes in late-stage patients who've been undertreating themselves. Harper sat on the opposite side of the bed, writing in her notebook, then typing on an old Smith Corona portable she'd brought from somewhere. She'd been at it for 6 hours straight, only stopping to sip water from a paper cone cup. What are you writing? His stories. Everything he told me these past weeks while I watched from the coffee shop. She didn't look up from the typewriter keys. 43 families he's reunited through letters. I have names, dates, details. Grant noticed she'd changed how she held her hands, left hand doing most of the work. Her right palm, the burned one, rested at an angle. Does it still hurt? Your hand? When it rains? She kept typing. Or when I hold a pen too long? The ventilator wheezed. Walter's eyes moved beneath closed lids. Dreams or something else, Grant couldn't tell. A knock at the door. Dorothy Miller entered with a thermos and paper cups. "Maxwell House," she said. "Walter would want you drinking the cheap stuff." She poured 3 cups, placed one on Walter's bedside table even though he couldn't drink it. The gesture felt necessary, like leaving a light on for someone who wasn't coming home. "His son called," Dorothy said. "Nathan, flying in from Boston. Should land at Greater Pitt by 8. "How did he know?" "I used Walter's telephone, found his address book." Dorothy pulled out the old flip phone held together with electrical tape. "His daughter's driving from Seattle, 15-hour drive straight through. She refused to fly, said her father would understand." Harper's fingers paused on the typewriter keys. "He talked about them, said they sent money he wouldn't accept." "Pride," Dorothy said. "Same disease that kills many of us, just slower than what's killing him." The ventilator alarm beeped. A nurse entered, white shoes squeaking on the linoleum, checked settings, adjusted something. Walter's eyes opened, unfocused. "Grant?" His voice came out rough around the breathing tube. "I'm here." "The letter. Did she—" "She read it," Grant said. "All 4 pages." Walter's eyes found Harper. She moved closer, touched his still hand. "I read it, Mr. Coleman. 3 times now." "And?" Harper looked at Grant across the bed. "I'm thinking about it." "Don't think too long." Walter's eyes closed again. "I graded papers for 15 years, never gave an extension that helped anyone." The nurse injected something into Walter's IV. His breathing deepened. "Sedative," she explained. "He needs rest." Day 2. Nathan Coleman looked like Walter might have 30 years ago. Same Lake Erie eyes, same careful way of moving. He stood in the doorway, doctor's bag over his shoulder, still wearing his white coat from Mass General. "Dad?" He moved to the bed, took Walter's hand. "It's Nathan." Walter's eyes opened, focused with effort. "Nathan, you came." "Of course I came." "Shouldn't have. Busy. Patience." "Dad, stop." Nathan's voice broke. "Just stop." Grant and Harper moved toward the door, giving them space. Nathan called them back. "Stay, please. He told me about you on the telephone last month. The publisher learning to write letters." He looked at Grant. "He said you were a slow student, but persistent." "Sounds about right." Nathan pulled papers from his bag. "He sent these, 1 letter a week for the past year. I never responded. Too angry about him refusing help." He spread them on the bedside table. "They're beautiful, every one, even as his handwriting got worse." Harper picked one up, read aloud. "Nathan, your mother would be proud. You became the healer I couldn't be." "He never told me he was proud when I graduated medical school," Nathan said. "Or during residency, or when I got the position at Mass General. But here, in these letters." Walter's breathing grew labored again. The ventilator alarm sounded. Day 3. Walter's daughter Sarah arrived exhausted, rain-soaked from driving through an ice storm near Cleveland. She looked nothing like Walter, small, blonde, contained. But when she spoke, Grant heard Walter's rhythm, his careful consideration of words. 15 hours, she said, stopped only for gas in Youngstown. She approached the bed slowly, like Walter might disappear if she moved too fast. "Hi, Dad." Walter's eyes tracked to her. His hand lifted slightly off the sheet, the first voluntary movement in 12 hours. "Sarah, my little lawyer." "Not little anymore, made partner last month." "I know. Saw the announcement in the Seattle Times online at the library." "You read the Seattle papers?" "Every morning, after I finished with Pittsburgh." His voice faded, returned. "Proud of you." Sarah broke then, sobbed into his chest while Nathan held her shoulders. Grant and Harper stood by the window, witnesses to a reunion that came too late and just in time. Day 4. Walter could barely speak. The Parkinson's had progressed to his throat muscles, but his eyes remained alert, following conversations like a teacher monitoring a classroom. Grant had brought the materials from the library steps: legal pads, pens, the folder of Harper's essays. He spread them on the rolling table. "Want to write?" Grant asked. Walter's eyes said yes. Grant placed a Bic pen in Walter's left hand, supported his wrist. The letters came out huge, childish, but readable. "Teach Harper." Harper leaned in. "Teach me what?" Walter's hand moved again, Grant guiding but not controlling. "The ending." Day 5. Marcus Brennan arrived. 24 years old, 97 days sober according to the AA coin he kept turning over in his pocket. He carried a notebook of his own. "Mr. Coleman, I know you can't speak much, but I need to read something to you." Walter blinked once. Yes. Marcus read his amends letter. Every person he'd hurt during his addiction. The professor whose career his father had destroyed to protect him topped the list. "You gave me the only honest F I ever got," Marcus said. "It took 8 years and almost dying, but I finally understood. You weren't punishing me. You were the only person who thought I was worth telling the truth to." Walter's hand moved slightly. Harper placed a pen in it, guided it to paper. "Forgiven." One word. It took everything Walter had left. Day 6. The doctor spoke quietly in the hallway, voice low like at a funeral parlor. "Hours, maybe a day. His organs are shutting down." Grant found Eugene in the waiting room, Aurora curled at his feet. They'd been sleeping there 3 nights, security looking the other way. "Bring her in," Grant said. "He needs to see her." They smuggled Aurora in under Eugene's army coat. The dog went straight to Walter's bed, placed her head on his still hand. Walter's eyes opened, focused on her white fur. His children were both there: Dorothy, Eugene, Harper, Grant. The people who'd become family through letters and loss. Walter's hand moved once more. Grant placed the pen in it, held paper steady. Walter wrote one word, letters barely formed but readable. "More." "More what?" Nathan asked. Harper understood. "More stories. He wants us to keep telling stories." Walter's eyes found Grant's, then Harper's. His fingers relaxed around the pen but didn't let go. The heart monitor's rhythm changed, slower, irregular, like an old clock winding down. "Dad?" Sarah grabbed his other hand. Walter's eyes stayed on Grant and Harper. His lips moved, no sound. But Grant could read the shape of the words. "Write her." Then his gaze shifted past them, to something none of them could see. Maybe his wife. Maybe his classroom. Maybe just the next sentence in a story they couldn't read yet. 3:57 p.m., December 19th, 2024. Walter Coleman died holding the tool of his trade, surrounded by people connected through his words. But on the bedside table, barely visible beneath the stack of letters, lay something Grant hadn't noticed before. A manila envelope, sealed, with his and Harper's names written in Walter's shaky hand. And below that, in fresher ink, 2 words: "Open together." The manila envelope felt heavier than paper should. Grant's thumb traced his name in Walter's deteriorating handwriting. Harper sat across from him in the hospital's family conference room, her typewriter closed, cassette recorder switched off. "Together," she said. He wrote, "Open together." Grant broke the seal. Inside, a rubber-banded stack of pages, different sizes, different papers. Some typed on an old Underwood, others handwritten. The top page, in Walter's steadiest hand, dated 3 weeks ago. The Education of Grant Harrison, a teacher's last lesson. Harper pulled it closer. They read side by side. "I knew who he was the moment he sat down. $40 haircut trying to look like he'd slept in his car. Italian shoes worth more than I made in a month teaching. But what gave him away was the hunger. Rich men investigating poverty look curious. Men starving for absolution look desperate." Grant's throat closed. Harper kept reading aloud. "He wanted me to write his daughter a letter. I wanted to teach him that forgiveness can't be ghostwritten. The next pages were different paper, photocopies of Harper's newspaper columns, annotated in Walter's red pen. Teaching marks, like he was still grading papers from his hospital bed. November 3rd entry. The man who counts everything but what matters. Your father, obviously. Note the specific detail about the Wall Street Journal fold. Only someone who's watched him for years would notice. November 17th. Invisible fathers, invisible daughters. You're both hiding in plain sight, performing elaborate dances to avoid contact. Look at the language here. You don't write about him with hate. You write about him with grief. Harper's fingers pressed against her eyes. He was teaching us both, through my own writing. The stack continued. Grant recognized receipts from the coffee shop, dated weeks before he'd discovered Walter. Library security camera stills showing Grant walking past Walter every morning for 3 years without seeing him. He planned this, Grant said. No. Harper found another document. Look. A medical report from Presbyterian, 8 months old. Parkinson's, stage 4. Prognosis, 12 to 18 months. He was already dying when you showed up, Harper said. You were just unexpected material for his last lesson. Grant turned the page. A carbon copy of correspondence between Walter and Marcus Brennan, dated 2 days before Grant first sat on the library steps. Marcus. Mr. Coleman, I need to make amends. You're number 1 on my list. Walter. You owe me nothing. Your father owes you everything. Marcus. My father says you destroyed your career for spite. Walter. I destroyed my career for truth. The distinction matters. Harper found a thick envelope taped to the next page. Same one he showed you? Grant opened it. Documents, dozens of them. Photocopies of memos between Senator Brennan and school administrators. Transcripts of recorded conversations. Grade change documentation going back 15 years. Names, dates, amounts paid. This is... Harper's fingers flew over the pages. This is systematic academic fraud, bribery, RICO violations if they crossed state lines. Your father's announcing his gubernatorial run next week, Grant said. Not anymore. Harper already had her notebook out. I can have this in tomorrow's paper. Harper, wait. She looked at him. Wait? You endorsed this man. Twice. Grant found the next document in Walter's stack. His own editorial from 6 years ago, praising Senator Brennan's commitment to educational excellence. Walter's red pen had crossed out Grant's words, written what should have been said. Some men build their careers on the shoulders of giants. Senator Brennan has built his on the broken backs of anyone who stood in his way. If you publish this, it ends Harrison Publishing, Harper said. You supported Brennan. You'll be implicated. I know. Harper studied his face. You're going to let me publish it anyway. Your story to tell. Walter gave you the evidence, not me. She began writing, then stopped. This will destroy everything you built. Everything I built deserves destroying if it protected men like Brennan. A knock at the door. Dorothy Miller entered with a man Grant didn't recognize. Tall, thin, pirate's cap pulled low. He moved like someone expecting to be asked to leave. Grant Harrison? His voice was familiar from the phone call. I'm Marcus Brennan. Grant stood. The senator's son looked nothing like his father. Where Thomas Brennan was polished excess, Marcus was stripped down to essentials. Recovery had carved away everything unnecessary. Mr. Coleman asked me to give you this. Marcus held out an envelope. Said to wait until after. Inside, Walter's handwriting, so shaky the words barely held together. Grant, you have practiced writing for 6 weeks. Now practice courage. Your daughter already has it. Learn from her. Marcus shifted his weight from foot to foot. There's more. About my father. We have the files, Harper said. No. You have the school stuff. Marcus pulled out a small tape recorder, the kind people used for dictation. I have the rest. Recordings from our house. Mom before she died. What he did to her when she tried to leave. The room felt airless. Grant remembered Mrs. Brennan, beautiful and silent at fundraisers, always leaving early with headaches. She went to your paper once, Marcus told Grant. 12 years ago. Had bruises, photographs, medical records from Allegheny General. Your executive editor killed the story. Richardson, Grant breathed. He said it was unsubstantiated. My father paid him $300,000. I have the canceled checks. Mom kept copies of everything in a safety deposit box. She knew someday someone would listen. Harper's writing had stopped. Mr. Brennan, Marcus, why give this to us? Because Mr. Coleman taught me that truth is the only thing that doesn't need forgiveness. It just needs to be told. Grant's telephone rang. Margaret's number. Yes? Mr. Harrison, Senator Brennan is here. In your office. Says it's about Walter Coleman. The blood drained from Grant's face. Harper noticed. What? Your father's in my building, right now. Marcus stepped back toward the door. He knows about the files. He has contacts everywhere. Someone at the hospital told him Walter died with documents. How long before he gets here? Harper asked. 20 minutes, maybe less if he bullies past security. Harper's fingers flew across her notepad. I can't write this properly in 20 minutes. You don't have to write it properly, Grant said. Just write it true. She looked at him, really looked, maybe for the first time in 6 years. You sound like Mr. Coleman. I had a good teacher. Marcus moved to the door. I should go. If my father sees me here... Stay, Grant said. You're part of this story. I'm 97 days sober. If he confronts me, 97 days is 97 more than he's been honest. Grant opened Walter's final pages. Look, a photograph fell out. Walter at his desk at Central High, before the Parkinsons, before the firing. On his blackboard behind him, in chalk. Every ending is a chance to revise the beginning. Below the photo, a list in Walter's hand. Names, hundreds of them. Every person he'd written letters for in 10 years. Grant Harrison's name was third from the bottom. Harper's was second. The last name, written just days ago when the tremor was so bad the letters barely formed, was Marcus Brennan. But beneath that, in pencil so light Grant almost missed it, Walter had written one more thing. Not a name, a question. Who teaches the teacher? 1 year later, January 13th, 2025. Grant's fingers no longer bled when he wrote. The callus on his middle finger had thickened into a permanent ridge, hard as a carpenter's hands. He sat on the same library steps, same spot Walter had claimed for a decade, though the Carnegie Library was still wrapped in scaffolding and construction plastic. 7 in the morning. Aurora lay at his feet, her red therapy dog vest bright against white fur. Eugene sat 3 steps up, teaching 2 Iraq veterans how to hold a pen proper. From the shoulder, Eugene said, demonstrating with his left hand. His right was still in a cast from last week's fall on the ice. Whole arm writes, Walter always said that. The Letter Project's new building stood across the street, the entire ground floor of what used to be Harrison Publishing. Grant had sold the upper 44 floors to fund operations in 10 cities. Pittsburgh, Detroit, Cleveland, Buffalo, Baltimore. Places where forgotten people needed help remembering how to speak to each other. Harper emerged from the building carrying coffee. Real coffee now, she'd won that battle 6 months ago. Good Colombian from the Strip District, but served in the same cracked thermos Walter had used. Marcus called, she said, handing Grant a cup. Miami location opens next week. He's got 14 volunteers trained. Marcus Brennan, 160 days sober, running southern operations from a halfway house in Coral Gables. His father was serving 3 to 5 in federal prison for bribery and racketeering. The trial had lasted 4 months. Grant testified on day 37, Harper on day 38. Marcus on day 1. Dorothy's inside, Harper continued, teaching Mandarin letter writing to 3 new volunteers. Dorothy Miller had become their head instructor. She'd finally stopped pretending her English was poor, though she still brought day-old pastries from the Giant Eagle Bakery every morning. A man approached from Wood Street, mid-30s, wearing a Carhartt jacket and paint-stained jeans. His hands shook, but not from Parkinson's. Grant recognized the tremor. Alcohol withdrawal, maybe day 3 or 4. "You the letter guy?" Grant nodded. "What do you need written?" "My old man. Haven't talked in 10 years. He's dying. Lung cancer, they said." Grant pulled out a legal pad, yellow, like Walter always used. "Sit." The man sat. Up close, Grant could see the resemblance to someone, though he couldn't place it. "What's your name?" "Brian. Brian Richardson." Grant's pen stopped. Richardson. His former executive editor who'd killed the Brennan abuse story 12 years ago. "Your father is Paul Richardson." "Yeah, you know him?" "We worked together, long time ago." Brian laughed, bitter as black coffee. "Yeah, well, he worked with a lot of people. Screwed most of them." He rubbed his face with both hands. "Look, I don't even know if I want to forgive him, but my sponsor says I need to write the letter anyway. For me, not him." Grant recognized the 12-step language. Walter would have known exactly what to write. "Tell me about before," Grant said. "Before he became who he is now, when you were small." Brian's shoulders dropped. "Saturday mornings, he'd make pancakes, Mickey Mouse-shaped, with chocolate chip eyes. Sang Sinatra while he cooked. Bad Sinatra, but he didn't care." Grant wrote, each word careful, considered, the way Walter had taught him. "What else?" "Taught me to throw a curveball. Spent 3 months in the backyard after work, every evening until dark. My hand was too small for the grip, but he modified it. Got me a kid's glove from Goodwill, relaced it himself." Grant kept writing. The letter took shape. Not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. Not absolution, but presence. The difference Walter had spent 6 weeks teaching. "Read it back," Brian requested when Grant finished. "Dad, I remember pancakes and Sinatra. I remember curveballs and patience. I remember the father you were before you became the man you are. I can't forgive what you did to Mom, to us, to yourself. But I wanted you to know that somewhere, in someone's memory, the good version of you still exists. Your son, Brian." Brian's tears hit the concrete, darkening spots like rain on dust. "That's perfect." Grant folded the letter, handed it over. "No charge." "Walter never charged either when it mattered," Harper said, approaching. She'd been documenting, her notebook filling with shorthand. "May I use this story? Anonymous, of course." Brian nodded, wiping his face with his jacket sleeve. "Yeah, maybe it helps someone else with a father they can't forgive." He walked away, letter in his pocket. Grant watched him go, then looked up at Harper. "You're writing again." "Never stopped. Just stopped showing you." She sat where Brian had been. "That letter you wrote me? The one you practiced 6 weeks for? I've read it every day for a year." "And?" "I forgive you." The words hit Grant like physical weight. His pen dropped, rolled down the steps. Aurora retrieved it, brought it back, tail wagging. "Just like that?" "No, not just like that. Like this, slowly, daily, one letter at a time." Harper pulled out her own legal pad. "I've been writing you back, every day. Haven't sent them, but Walter said the writing was what mattered, not the sending." She had a stack of yellow pages, covered in her half-cursive, half-print handwriting. "May I read them?" "Someday, not yet." She looked at the building that used to bear the Harrison name, now simply The Letter Project, in Walter's handwriting, enlarged and carved in Pennsylvania limestone. "We've helped 9,000 people this year. 9,001, Grant corrected, nodding toward Brian Richardson's retreating figure. The morning sun hit the library's renovation fence. Someone had attached a bronze plaque where Walter used to sit. Grant hadn't seen it before. Harper must have arranged it. The inscription, in Walter's own shaky handwriting, reproduced in metal. Every hand can write. Every heart can forgive. Every word matters. Every letter is a lesson. Below that, smaller, Walter Coleman, 1966 to 2024, teacher. Aurora stood, stretched, walked to the plaque. She touched her nose to Walter's name, then returned to Grant's feet, waiting, ready for the next person who needed help. Eugene called down, "Grant, got someone here needs a letter to his daughter. Russian fellow. Dorothy's busy with the Mandarin folks." Grant stood, knees protesting. 53 years old, learning Russian one letter at a time. "Coming." Harper caught his arm. "Dad?" He turned. Mr. Coleman would be proud. Grant looked at the plaque, the building, the people gathering for morning lessons, then at his daughter, standing beside him for the first time in 7 years. He'd mark it up with red pen, say we could do better. Then we better do better. They walked up the steps together. At the top, Grant turned back. The city stretched out below, waking up slow like it always did. Somewhere out there, 9,000 letters were being opened, read, wept over, saved in shoeboxes and dresser drawers. Walter was right. Every ending was a chance to revise the beginning. 5 years have passed since Walter Coleman died holding that pen. I'm Grant Harrison, though that name means nothing now. What matters is this. We've written 100,000 letters, not typed, written, by hand. Each one connecting someone who couldn't find words to someone who needed to hear them. Yesterday, a grandmother in Detroit wrote to her grandson in prison. Today, a father in Buffalo wrote to his daughter in Seattle. Tomorrow? Who knows? We sit on library steps in 40 cities now, not because Walter told us to, but because we finally understood what he was teaching. Connection doesn't require perfection, just presence, just truth, just the courage to pick up a pen and admit you were wrong. The Letter Project isn't about charity. It's about remembering that every person walking past carries letters they've never sent, apologies they've never made, love they've never expressed. We just help them find the words. This story is inspired by tales of human reconciliation created solely for entertainment purposes. This narrative does not condone, encourage, or promote any form of violence or harmful behavior. All characters and events depicted are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to real persons, living or deceased, or actual events is purely coincidental. The story aims to explore themes of forgiveness, redemption, and human connection through fiction.